Have you ever found yourself feeling lost and unfulfilled, searching for the meaning of life and purpose in your life? And then perhaps you heard someone say, well, what is it that you love to do? That's your purpose. Well, I beg to differ. You see, purpose is not about you. It's not about me. Purpose is about who we are and how we serve other people. I really appreciate the quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. The purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, and to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. And in today's episode, our guest, Elvira Guzman, will share with us how to live and live well. So don't go nowhere. Hang out with us here in the locker room of life. Welcome to Time to Win podcast. It's not just a podcast. It's the official personal growth locker room of life, where champions just like you gather to cultivate their courage, create a life-changing game plan of success, and celebrate their wins. I'm RJ Jackson, your personal growth coach and host, and I'm committed to seeing you win. As a professional speaker and growth coach for over 3 decades, I've worked with and inspired thousands to grow their greatness and transform their setbacks into a comeback. And now it's your turn. It's time to win. So if you're ready, grab something to take notes with. We're about to dive in. Let's go fight win. All right, you giant slayers, welcome back and welcome to another episode of Time to Win podcast. With me, your host, RJ Jackson, the courage giver, your mindset coach and speaker for your next event, and my special guest today, Elvira Guzman. Now, this is the continuation of a special series with women who are winning, women who understand the importance of getting underneath each other and lifting each other up and encouraging us all to enjoy this chapter of life. I'm looking forward to having an intentional conversation with Elvira. But before we dive into the conversation, let me share a little bit about Elvira with you. She is a producer, brand strategist, and author who has worked for comedian, actor, radio host, and author Steve Harvey. As a TV and radio host, CEO, and producer, she has not only worked with Steve Harvey, but many celebrities and athletes. She is a USC alumni and Omar's wife. We're going to dive into the conversation with Elvira right after a word from our sponsors.
Indulge in the artistry of beauty with Makeup and Lashes by Carol. Carolyn Felix, a certified makeup, lash, and microblading artist, works her magic to enhance your natural beauty with precision and skill. Carolyn's commitment to staying on top of the latest trends and techniques ensures that you receive personalized and cutting-edge beauty services. Experience the difference. Discover the magic of personalized beauty. Visit Makeup and Lashes by Carol on Instagram at Lashes by Carolina. That's Lashes by Carolina with 4 A's. Elevate your glamour because you deserve to feel beautiful inside and out.
Check out our sponsors, including The Cure for Women at thecureforwomen.com. That's The Cure for Women at thecureforwomen.com, where you heal, grow, and belong. And be sure to tell them you heard about them on Time to Win podcast. Now, let's go ahead and do what we said we're going to do, and that is provide you with information that causes transformation in your situation. Because that's what we do here on Time to Win podcast in the locker room of life. And today is no exception to the rule. As I shared with you earlier, we have with us our special guest, Elvira Guzman. And she was for about 9 years the publicist for Steve Harvey, along with several other celebrities and athletes. and today she's going to talk to us and share with us the journey and inspire us around our purpose. So, Elvira, we want to say welcome. We're thrilled to have you here with us, and we're excited about diving into today's topic with you, finding your purpose. So, why don't we just go ahead and get started by going back and having you share your story and your journey with us and bringing us up to date.
Wonderful. So I'm from Covina, California. I'm the youngest of 4 children. I'm Mexican and Filipino. And I would say that I had a very privileged and great childhood where there was a lot of love, there was a lot of laughter, there was a lot of family. And I feel really appreciative to be able to have been mentored by my parents to start off my life. And of course, my siblings, in particular, my sister Sandy. But I did have a huge obstacle when I was 14 years old. Being that my parents owned multiple businesses, they had to go from one business to another just to make sure that they all thrived. And their businesses were in Azusa, Covina, Los Angeles. And unfortunately, when I was 14 years old, I got the news that both of my parents were going to be incarcerated for at least 20 years to life because they had found a bag of drugs in one of the restrooms, in one of the closets. And at that time, I couldn't even fathom what 20 years looked like because I had only been on this earth for 14 years. And as you can imagine, that completely shattered my mind, my heart, my life. And many times I explain it where I really do feel that all of my pieces shattered on the floor and I didn't know how to begin to pick them back up to construct my life again. And that process took me about 4 years. And from the age of 14 years old to 18 years old, I told people that my parents went to Mexico to start more businesses because in the neighborhood that I was brought up in particular, the high school I went to, if they knew that you didn't have parents at home, it was almost like you were calling people to come and mess with you or to come and try to steal from you. And so I kept all of that quiet. And from that moment on, I say that I had to turn into a 30-something-year-old where instead of focusing on a boyfriend or my big game that was coming up, I had to focus also on how am I going to generate revenue so I can eat? How am I going to generate money so that I could put gas in one of these cars so I could drive myself to school? And I had to start dealing with those tough issues where typically people don't have to deal with those things until after they graduate college. So the positive thing about that situation is one of the girls on my basketball team who was older, and she wasn't even one of my friends at the time. She was just an associate because you know how it is in high school where you don't want to hang out with the freshmen. And I just happened to be really good at basketball and volleyball. And so I had made the junior varsity and varsity teams. So luckily they were older. And one of them worked at Round Table Pizza. And I'll never forget this. She asked me to go outside. And because she looked a little intimidating, I was scared. I was like, oh no, here we go. Like, I'm going to get in a fight. But she was like, no, she was said to, not worry and relax, that her mom was one of my mom's clients and that her mom told her to look out for me. And she said that she knew that I wasn't old enough to have a job because you're supposed to get a worker's permit, I believe, like at 15 and a half. And then you're able to start working at around 16. Well, I was just 14, but because she was the manager at the time, she gave me that opportunity. And so the next thing I know, I was working at the Round Table Pizza at the West Covina Plaza. Back in the day, that's what it was called. And it was one of the best experiences I could ever have because I didn't want to be home. I was alone at home. My sister at the time had just graduated from USC and she was a teacher. But her schools were in LA. And so I would rarely see her. So having that, I call it my pizza family, was incredible for me. So after my sports, which would end about sports practice that would end about 4:30, I would go directly to the pizza place and I would work until 12 to 1 o'clock because I would always ask for the closing shift so that I could get more hours. And I would sweep, mop, set up for the next day. And I would go to school like nothing ever happened. And during those years, I remember it was really difficult because a lot of the people that I grew up with, they didn't have to work because their parents would pay their way. And sometimes they would tease me when they would go to the mall with their friends and just hang out and they would see me, they're serving slices of pizza and so serving sodas. but I just had to put my head down and just, sometimes just cry it out. I remember going to the freezer and just like crying, and then having my friend come in and be like, no, who cares about them? Like, get back out here. Like, you're doing what you have to do. So that's a little bit about my upbringing. And I'll share a little more with you after.
Elvira, you are proof. You are proof that everyone has a story, and we never know someone's story just by looking at them or where they are in their life today. So thank you for taking us back and allowing us to understand your journey, where you've come from, how life was before you got to the point of helping so many other people. What I heard you say is before you could help anyone, you learned, and at a very early age, you didn't have to wait until you turned 40 to learn the lesson, which unfortunately so many people do, but you learned at a very early age how important it was to accept help from someone. Because your friend, which wasn't your friend at the time, whose mom said to her, watch out for her, watched out for you, and she reached out to you to help you, and you reached back and said, I'll accept your help. That is powerful. And that's a beautiful.
Absolutely. And also what that taught me is to not be ashamed of the type of work that you're doing. I know looking back, that was one of the best experiences I could have ever had, because I couldn't be late. I couldn't call out sick because I needed that job. And who else was going to hire me at my age?
So what I hear you saying, and what I hear you say when you speak, whether it's in this interview or in person, is you had to grow up. And you didn't just grow up, you grew up professionally, and you grew up with a mature attitude. And in everything I hear you say and do, I see nothing less than a professional woman. So take us on that journey. Like, where did you go after pizza? Subway?
Actually, when I turned 18, I started going to Mount San Antonio College, Mount SAC, and I actually made it on the volleyball team, which I believe is a really big thing. Of course, I was the shortest one, and so many people tried out, and I felt really, really proud to make the team, but I didn't know what God had in store for me. My best friend on the team, her name was Erica. Seeing that I was working at the pizza place and they were starting to transition to get a new manager, and my friend was no longer manager that would be able to give me the hours that I needed. And so she told me that she knew somebody that worked at clinics, at laboratories, where they would test specimen, and all I would have to do is data entry because I didn't have any of the certification that was needed. And so at that time, my pay would be, instead of $300 every 2 weeks, I was going to start to make $450 every 2 weeks. And at that time, that was a significant increase. So I started working at that laboratory. But once again, we make plans, and then God always has God's way. And so one day when I was driving to Zero Period, which started at 6 o'clock in the morning so that I could go to the laboratory later in the day, I heard Steve Harvey on his morning show say that he was going to have an in-studio audience. And if we faxed in, we might be picked so that we could go in. And I absolutely took him up on that opportunity. And as soon as I got to my laboratory job, I faxed in. I didn't even type it up. I just wrote on a white piece of paper and I faxed in. And I just absolutely believed that I was going to be picked for that opportunity. And so I remember being in a class at Mount SAC, and my phone rang, and I seen a 323 number. And I got so excited because I just knew that it was them, because I didn't know anybody in the LA County. And so I answered, and yes, it was an on-air personality that was very famous at the time. His name was Big Pee Wee. And he was like, congratulations, you won 2 tickets to be an in-studio audience member. And I was incredibly excited. And the next thing I know, I'm there at 5:30 in the morning getting ready. And I just couldn't wait until the man that I felt had inspired me walked in the door. And I just remember the feeling that I felt. I felt like a different frequency, a different vibration when I was in that studio. And something inside of me was just saying, Elvira, this is where you need to be. This is what your next step is. And I just remember Steve Harvey walking in, doing his morning show for the next 4 hours. But I listened to that small voice inside of me that said, this is your next step. And so at the end, when security comes and they escort all of the in-studio members out to the right, I seen that Steve went through the door on the left. And I walked through that door and I started to ask every single person in there, how can I get a job? How can I work here? And of course they laughed at me because I was just 18 years old, but I was on it. I had my elevator pitch ready way back then. And I was like, I had a 4.2 GPA in high school. I played volleyball. I'm very professional. I could do what needs to be done. I just want an opportunity. And they told me that I could get an internship first, and then they would see if somebody would want to hire me after. And that's what I did. I got an internship, and 3 months later, I wrote Steve Harvey a letter, not asking him for a job, but simply thanking him, because after interning and working and seeing how his team functioned, I knew that that's what I wanted to do in my life. And he offered me an opportunity, and he told me that he was going to pay me double whatever job I had was paying me at the time. And he told me that he was going to change my life. And he absolutely did. That was the beginning of working with him and his team for 9 years.
Now, there's a clear example right there, ladies and gentlemen, of what hope will do. You have to believe, because hope is believing beyond what you see. Now, Elvira, as you shared that beautiful story of hope in your journey with us and how you got from pizza to publicity for Steve Harvey for 9 years, you had this time of interning. And I'm just curious, did you do something that most people don't do in life to set yourself apart from all the other interns and people working there?
Yes, I used to go to my internship 2 hours early, and I would leave 2 hours late. And I wasn't supposed to be able to do that. However, I knew that the receptionist got to work at 9 o'clock, and she had no idea who was already in the building. And they give you a little key card to come in. And so I figured if I got there at 8 o'clock in the morning, nobody would know. And I would just hide in the mail room, and I would just start sorting through and putting mail in everyone's little box, because in the radio industry, you get buckets and buckets of mail every day. And so I would just start to distribute it, put it on everyone's desk, asking everyone if they wanted coffee or if they wanted me to order them some food from the restaurant downstairs. I would be happy to go get it. And I did that. And then I stayed 2 hours late, and I would help the afternoon drive and the midday drive person do exactly the same thing. And the next thing you know, everybody knew my name at the radio station, and they all wanted me to continue to work in their departments, but Steve Harvey snagged me.
So he snagged you and said, I want her to work for me. I see her work ethics, I see her passion, and I want that on my team. He saw your possibility from the inside out. And that's a beautiful thing, for people to look at us and see who we are from the inside out. And the only way they see that, we have to be willing to show that. And that is about purpose. So you reached your goal. You set a goal. You said this is what you wanted to do. You put in the work, and you didn't quit. Now, here we are in the season of goal setting and reaching our goals. And most people have gotten to the point where they've quit. They are like 2 months in, and they're like, forget this. No, I'm done. It's too much work. But you didn't just work. You went above and beyond what was asked of you and expected from you. So my question is, what inspired you? What inspired you to go get coffee, go pick up food and sort the mail and go the extra mile?
I would say that having worked or volunteered. Well, actually, my parents did pay me. From the time I was 5 to 14, when they went to jail, I would go with them to their different businesses, and I would see what was needed in order to succeed. I would see employees that would get fired. I would see employees that would get promoted, and I would see employees that would get bonuses. And just seeing what it took to get that bonus or to get hired, I knew exactly what I needed to do once I got in a place that I wanted to stay, because I would do the same thing at the pizza restaurant. nobody asked me to stay later to make sure that everything was set for the next day so that when the morning people come, they don't have to do all of that work and it was already done. And I knew that that was a way to secure my job. And so just having those experiences throughout my life, I knew exactly what I needed to do by the time I was 18 and I was working for Steve. Because remember, I told you I turned into a 30-something-year-old when I was 14. So by the time I was 18, I was an expert in knowing how to keep a job and be promoted.
Here you are. You're 18 years old and working for Steve Harvey. Now, was that on the Steve Harvey morning show? Was that while he was on television? Take us through the journey.
Yeah, so he hired me to work for his various companies. So at the time, I worked for his radio show. I was a segment producer. And then as soon as we were done at the radio, we would go to his office at Sunset Gower Studios, where he produced not only his shows, but various other shows like BET's Comic View, BET's Coming to the Stage, several shows for UPN and MTV. And so I remember going there right after the radio station, and I would meet his other staff members that would just work on the production side. And I remember being the youngest by at least 10 years. And I remember not making the same amount of money that they did. And I know that because of the cars they drove, the type of clothes that they had, the purses they had, the shoes they had. And I remember saying, I'm going to get there. I'm going to be like them one day. And I remember going to Ross and buying my little clothes little by little with every check that I would get. And I'll never forget that Shirley Strawberry was the person who actually purchased my first luxury bag. She bought me a Fendi, and she didn't want anybody to look down on me because she wanted me to be like one of them. And so just having mentors in the business that have always held my hand and have helped me to learn how to dress for success, how to speak for success, and having that experience was so important. And also being able to be at the Sunset Gower Studios lot was just so incredible, because at the time there was a big show called Heroes that was on with Peyton, I forget her full name, but she was on there. I remember the Parkers filmed on there, various other shows. And because I work with Steve Harvey, I had the ability to go on set, see how they did their thing. And I'll never forget, the executive producer of the Parkers was actually an Afro-Latina named Marilyn Gill. And I just thought that that was so incredible. First, because she was a woman being an executive producer, and second, because she was Latina. And I just remember one time I was trying to get into the elevator to go upstairs, and she was there. And I was like, oh my God, so nervous, because I had seen her run huge sets. And the next thing I know, she decides to be one of my mentors. And right now I call her one of my bonus moms, because she has carried me through this industry. And I mean carried me through because as a woman, and especially a woman of color in the industry, there's many times where we feel knocked down, we feel not seen, we feel unappreciated. And she has taught me definitely how to get the wages that I deserve, how to get the jobs that I deserve. And having people like that in my corner, there's no way that I wouldn't have been able to be successful.
As I'm listening to your story, I'm literally reminded of a quote that I really appreciate that talks about people. And it says, there are 3 types of people we need in our life. Number 1, people we can lift up. And I believe you did that every day you went to work beyond what you were asked to do. And number 2 is people who journey with us, our peers, people who are shoulder to shoulder with us, and they take the journey with us. And in your case, the people you worked with, the people who not necessarily that had more money than you, but people who worked on your level with you. And then number 3, we need people who can lift us up. And that was your story of the executive director and even Shirley Strawberry, which I actually want to take a moment. I want to take a moment out right now and shout out to Shirley Strawberry. I remember when I used to produce and host women's conferences, we honored her. We honored her because of her integrity, because of her heart and her passion and her purpose that she fulfilled, using the radio airways to serve other people and lift other people up and encourage other people. And I heard you say in your story, that's exactly what she did for you. And so thank you for sharing that story with us because you know what? For me, that solidifies the truth that our honoring her, even though I didn't know her personally, our honoring her was not in vain, that she really was a woman of integrity. So thanks for sharing that with us. So let me ask you, in going the extra mile and serving and lifting up other people, did you ever get tired?
No, I think my answer is no because I loved what I did. To me, going to the radio station and then going to the film studio was a privilege for me. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, I get to go to Disneyland every single day. And just the way that I would feel, I never wanted to leave. And also the type of work that I was doing was, I would say, in my wheelhouse. I've always been a great writer. I've always been somebody who takes charge and knows exactly what to do. I don't need to be micromanaged. And so in that position, or in the various positions, because I had to do TV producing, radio producing, develop brands, develop other people's brands that he would also work with, to me was just an honor, and I loved doing it. I also, at the time, I didn't stop going to school. So I still went to Mount Sac for the next 2 years and I got straight A's. And at that point, I decided to transfer. And at the time, because my parents were still incarcerated, I wanted to be a judge because I felt that if I was a judge, I wouldn't make innocent people like my parents go to jail, and I would be able to do something about it in our community. But I learned that first you have to be a criminal attorney. And so I was looking for schools that had great law programs. And the two that I found were Loyola Marymount and USC. And at the end of the day, USC won because my sister is also an alumni. But I'm very grateful that I was accepted to both schools. And I did go to USC, and I was actually able to graduate with a 4-year degree, and actually 3 years because I'm a hustler. And like I said, writing is one of my expertise, so I could just fly through classes. And I remember when I went to USC, I asked to take 20 units a semester instead of the typical 12. And they actually had to do a psych evaluation to make sure that I wasn't crazy, because after 18 units, they think you're a little cuckoo for wanting to take so much on. And I'll never forget, I went to that evaluation and they seen my grades that I have never gotten a B in my life. And they're like, okay, we feel that you could do it. And so instead of getting 1 degree at USC, I actually got 2 degrees. And I stayed with my class because I did enjoy the partying when I had time and the football games. I went to school during the time that Matt Liner and Reggie Bush were there, so we never lost a game. And I also felt that for the first time, I wanted to somewhat be a kid and somewhat let go a little bit. And because Steve Harvey never worked on weekends, I had both days off. And so I would be able to engage in some of the things that, 20, 21-year-olds did. So for me, that was very refreshing. And it was an incredible experience. And throughout that time, I went from being a segment producer to the time I was 21, being the executive producer of the Steve Harvey Morning Show. And I'll never forget that experience, because having people come in and give me that type of respect and always asking me, how old are you? How old are you? And Steve eventually told me to say I was 25. And when they asked me why I was going to USC, to say that I was getting my master's, because he said people would give me more respect, because unfortunately there's age discrimination both ways. But I actually got caught because one of my schoolmates, actually her godmom was a big time person at BET. And when we're doing Comic View one day, she was one of the PAs, and I had a higher role. I was a talent booker. And she walked up to me. She's like, hey, didn't I see you in one of my classes? And I was like, oh my gosh. And I told her, I was like, please don't tell anybody, please, because then they're going to know that I lied about my age. And we're friends to this day. Her name's Imani, and we were great friends, and we were able to transition this journey together. I remember when we both graduated USC, we both wanted to go to Columbia. I wanted to go to Columbia Law School, and she wanted to go to the film program. And so right around that time, I remember still going to New York and seeing the school with her. And I just remember she asking her aunt if we could stay at her house. I had no idea she had this type of wealth. And because in my community, Black and brown people were, I had never seen anyone more than middle class. And my friend, she's Jamaican. And so I remember going, she was like, oh yeah, and by the way, my aunt is quite wealthy. She makes a lot of money in stock. So, don't be surprised when we go to the apartment. Try not to make it a big deal. And I'm like, okay, I didn't understand. And sure enough, I walked into this huge penthouse in Columbus Square. And then that motivated me so much. And I remember just walking around and seeing Central Park and thinking, I can do this too. I can do this too. I can achieve this too. And a big part of brown and Black girls being able to have that inside of the knowing is being able to see it. And that's incredibly powerful. So right around that time, Steve decided to start the Steve Harvey radio network. So he was branching off from just being hired by radio stations, and he wanted to create his own network. And out of all of the employees that he had at the time, which were maybe about 20 employees, he was only going to select one person to relocate to New York with him and his manager to start this thing and work from WBLS in New York. And I happened to be that one person that he selected. And I'm very grateful. I moved to New York. I had that experience after graduating from USC, and I helped him grow his radio network from 4 radio stations to just about 80 radio stations. So I feel very fortunate that my hustle mentality, my getting up early, never being late, never calling out sick, never having any excuses, paid off in the long run.
Whew. Wow. Just amazing. Simply amazing. I want to just take a pause for the cause and welcome everyone who is listening. And let me say to you, if you are not indulged in this conversation right now, I don't know what to say. Because listen, it just keeps getting better and better. Such great nuggets being dropped throughout the story. Elvira, wow. What a journey. And I want to go back. I want to go back in your journey. And I want to go back to the point where you said, I just want to be a kid. Wow. So many women grew up and didn't have a chance to be a kid. They had to take care of their siblings. They had to go to work. They weren't allowed to be a kid. But somewhere in their life, they did have dreams of what they wanted to do when they grew up. And unfortunately, they had to put those dreams on the shelf. They had to put them behind them in order to do what was expected of them. And somehow, especially as women, they lost that dream. They lost themselves and their family and their children and their jobs. And right now, I can hear her in her heart saying, me too. I just want to be a kid again. I want to dream. I want to live out my dreams. I want to fulfill my purpose in what I know I've been called to do. What would you say to her? What words of encouragement would you share with her to help her realize she doesn't have to live where she's dying, and she don't have to die where she's living?
I would say that it's never too late to chase your dreams, to write down your plan, write down what you initially wanted to do when you were a kid that used to light up your heart, that used to make you smile, that would give you that glow. Remember that and pursue it. Create a plan, surround yourself with the right people, and just know inside that you are capable of achieving every single thing that you've ever dreamt of. If not, you would have never dreamt it in the first place. All of those dreams are placed inside of us by God, and we can do it. And the next thing I would tell them is do what I do. I go to Dave & Buster's often. I go play miniature golf. I go to Top Golf. I have a slide in my backyard so I could slide down in the pool. I do things that I feel that I missed out when I was younger. because that little girl is still in here and she still wanted to, just have frivolous fun without having to count how many hours until I have to go to work. And thank God now my time is mine and nobody can restrict it. And I could do all of those things. I mean, just yesterday, my husband and I, after work, we had a stressful day. We're like, DMB, let's go get it. And like, we're going to go play some games, because to some extent, he also feels that he missed a bit of his childhood and he enjoys doing kid things like I do. And I'm just so grateful. And like I said, it's never too late. And who cares what other people think? I see when I go to Dave & Buster's, I see little kids waiting in line after us to get the machine. And I'm like, okay, you'll be next, but I have to take care of my little girl inside first.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me get this straight. You're in Dave & Buster's busting up the kids, telling them to get back because it's your turn?
I need fun too.
That part right there. Fun too. Yes. And that's what we want women to understand, that you should be enjoying life. When you're serving other people, when you are passionate about what you do, it's fun. It's not work at all. And you talked about that when I asked you, do you ever get tired? You said no. I'm doing what I love and I love what I do. So it's not work at all.
Exactly. I think it's only a job when you're doing something that doesn't correspond to your purpose, doesn't fulfill you inside. That's when 1 hour at work, you're like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. That's how you know that it's not for you. And you need to start your transition to living a purpose-driven life rather than a career-driven life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so you were doing what you love. You were loving what you do. You have found your purpose and living life on purpose. And it seemed to have come to an end. I'm not sure. So why don't you walk us through that part of the journey, the transition you went through, and what that transition was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was working in New York for about a year, during that year, Steve loves to speak at high schools and middle schools and colleges. And so, of course, I was his right-hand person. So I would go with him to all of these events. And soon I realized that if Steve actually had a book to give to the kids after he left, they would have a little piece of him with them every single day and not just have to remember this speech that Steve gave. Because remember, this is before iPhone times where you could actually record and have it forever. And so right around that time, I created a book that I wanted Steve to release under his name. And the title, I recall, was "What Would You Attempt to Achieve If You Knew You Could Not Fail? Plan plus dream equals success." And so I had outlined all of this because remember, I had a lot of kinetic energy left from going to school and also working with Steve. I almost felt like, okay, I'm home at 8:00 at night. I need something to do, like, because I wasn't used to sitting down and watching TV, which is something that my parents never allowed. I needed to be useful. I needed to be purposeful. And so I remember showing that book to Steve and him saying, great, but I'm not ready to release a book yet. He was like, but I love it. I think it's incredible. And so I took that book, aka that little dream, away for a later time. And right around that time, keep in mind that I've never seen my parents work for anyone. And so at the time I was working 18 hours a day. I was running Steve's stock portfolio. I was running his foundation. I was running all of his companies. And I started to feel like I was outgrowing that position. And I wanted to start my own publicity company at that time. And I was just 22 years old. And I still remember people laughing at me saying, are you kidding me? You're so young. You haven't made working with Steve, like traveling the world. Like, why do you want to start your own business? And I told him, I never seen my parents work for anyone. I know that I could do it. And I know that I could be successful because I do want to start to create my wealth. I do want to start to be able to give back in the ways that I've seen my mentors do. And so with a lot of respect, I asked Steve if I could please relocate back to the LA offices so that I could start my business. And in New York, it was just not possible. People make way too much money there and the rent is way too high to get an office space. And so I realized going to LA was my best bet. So I moved back to LA. I still work with Steve's company, but now not in a capacity where I had to go to every meeting he went to or every brainstorming session that he would have with his team. Now I had more flexibility to start my business. So that's when my first baby, LVGPR, was born. And I'll tell you, I told one of my good friends at the time who she was working at Viacom, which owned MTV, BET, and VH1. And she told me she was going to put me on a TV show so that my business would just boom. And I was very, very shy. I'm still shy now. People don't believe it, but I'm very, very shy and I have social anxiety. And I was like, well, I don't know if I could do this. I don't know if I could, be in front of cameras. I'm used to being behind the camera. She's like, Elvira, you'll be great. You just be yourself, play yourself. And I was like, okay, as long as you don't give me a script or things like that and I could just flow, I'll do it. And so they put me on, at the time, a #1 BET show. And man, that just made my company just flourish. And I quickly went from having just Steve as my first client to having a roster of over 15 clients. And that included athletes, celebrities, comedians, film companies, radio stations. And I was getting promoted by, at the time, one of the biggest magazines was Sister to Sister magazine. And they put me in their magazine to give me an acknowledgement. And that also helped me. So the next thing I know, I have to hire as many people as possible to take this person to a red carpet, take this person to a gala, and just try to multiply myself in so many ways. And really, that's how the next chapter of my life started.
And what a chapter you just shared with us. So I can only imagine the next chapter. But before we go to the next chapter, I could just imagine someone's listening saying, yeah, that's success and that's purpose. But she had Steve Harvey. I mean, she was working with Steve Harvey. And who do I have? I have no one. I'm just trying to do this thing on my own, live my purpose out and be successful. But I don't have anyone. So how can I do what she did? It's impossible. What would you say to her?
That they're completely wrong. First, they need to remember that they have God. That first and foremost is the only person that you need. And Steve in my life has only been one of maybe 20 to 30 mentors that I've had. I would suggest to them to seek mentors. Send out letters, send out emails, send text messages, send Instagram messages, LinkedIn messages. Get the mentors that you need in order for them to open the doors that you cannot open on your own. And the next thing is to never compare your journey to somebody else's journey. Just because my journey started off really, really fast, that doesn't mean that their journey has to necessarily be the same, because God has a specific plan for each and every one of us. And just like Oprah says, we're all in a race, right? But every race is our own line, versus saying, oh, I'm competing against Oprah, I'm competing against Steve Harvey, I'm competing against Tony Robbins. Absolutely not. And if I dare to take a turn to see where they're at, I'm taking the focus off of my race, and that's slowing me down. And that can make me fall. That can make me not want to continue if I fall. So I would just encourage them to focus on their own lane and to create their own path. And yes, look for motivation in other people's stories, but don't think that your story has to be like theirs.
We all have a story and a purpose. And if everybody's story was the same, who would want to hear it?
Exactly.
And not only do we have a story, we do have a purpose. And I love how God reminds us in his word that we do have a purpose. And he says, I know the plans that I have for you. They are plans for a future and a hope. And he says that in Jeremiah. But sometimes we look at the journey that we're on, the ups and the downs and the steps we take backwards, and we go, yeah, but I'm just a failure. I look at you and I hear your story, and I know you're successful. You're living life on purpose. You found your purpose. You're living life on purpose. I'm just curious, have you ever felt that it didn't work for you and that you failed? And if you believe in failure, what did that look like for you in your journey? And what does that look like to you in general?
I don't believe in failure. I do believe in setbacks and obstacles, but I don't believe in failure. Every failure is either there to direct you in another direction where God wants you to be, or it's to shake people out of your journey that need to be gone. And yes, that may slow you down a bit, but that in the long run is going to make you run faster and to finish your race in a much better way than you would have done it before. So I absolutely do not believe in failure. I'll give you an example. When I was uh, from 25 to 27, I was dealing with health issues. But I don't look at that as a failure or a setback. I look at that as a beautiful obstacle that came my way so that I could reevaluate what I'm doing here and where I'm putting my energy. And once I was able to get my mind right where God wanted me to get it right, boom, I had perfect health again. Sometimes God just wants to sit us down because we're moving so fast in a direction that perhaps we shouldn't be going in, that God needs us to sit down so that we could be redirected. And when we get back up, we're running in the right lane versus a lane that God really didn't intend for us.
Because without a doubt, we want to do what God is intending for us to do, live out His will in our life and fulfill our purpose. And that's what we're talking about today, finding purpose. What would God have me to do? And yes, along the way, I'm going to have some setbacks, but they're all a setup for a comeback and purpose. So I'm just curious, you talked about mentors. Who really is that one person who inspired you, like to the fullest?
Undoubtedly, without a question, my mother. My mother is someone that I looked up to my entire life, and I still look up to her today, even though she's in heaven. She had a fifth grade education and she turned herself into a millionaire with just God by her side, no mentors. And just seeing how she maneuvered through life, how she held her head up high, how she always made sure that she gave everyone respect, from the person that picks up the trash to the managers in her business. She always treated everyone with dignity. And I just seen that whatever she put her mind to, she would always achieve. And she would always just tell me, Elvira, it's in your mind. What do you want? You can have it. And so just having my mom support her awareness and her mentorship that whatever I've ever wanted, I've been able to achieve, is simply because my mom told me growing up, you want that, you could get it, no matter what it was. I've always been able to manifest my dreams because as a child, my mom told me that I had that creative power. And because my parents had spiritual stores, that's all that I know. And before, they always have a book section in all of their stores. So before they would sell the books, I would read all the books. And my brother taught me how to speed read. And so I've learned from tons and tons of people that are also very inspirational, but the very first one and the best one is my mother.
I always love my mama. She's my favorite girl. Okay, I had to go there. Y'all know me. I'm not a singer. I am a professional speaker, but I love to make a joyful noise. Oh, and about mama? Oh, yeah. So, yes, Elvira, I am picking up what you're putting down when you say it was mama. By the way, I know your mom would really be proud of you right now. Now, you talked about reading the books that your mom had in the store. And I know you love to read, but I also know you've said it several times, you love to write. And I think you have about 4 books out right now. Am I right?
Yes, I have released 4 books of my own, and I've actually written 8 books. And I've been the ghostwriter for several celebrities like Steve Harvey, Rosie Rivera, Cupid, and I do believe I have at least one more book in me that I'm going to write soon. But I like to believe that I'm a vessel for these books to come through. And until my vessel is completely ready for that book to be manifested, I'm going to just hold off, because it's incredibly important that it's not Elvira writing the book, it's God writing the book through Elvira.
Now, I don't know where you are in your story as you're listening to Elvira's story today, but I just want you to know that wherever you are is not the end. You're in a story, God's story, and the great plans that He has for you. And trust me when I tell you, there's another page. So don't get stuck where you are. Maybe you haven't heard it in a long time, but I just want to remind you, you you got this. And what God has for you is for you. Don't compare yourself to anyone else, as Elvira shared with us. Just ask God what He would have you to do, and then Get in your lane, and as my pastor, Pastor Dan, would say, stay in your lane, stay on your number. Elvira, what do you say?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I believe that every single thing that you've gone through is intended to make you better, to make you stronger. And if we just find the seed of greatness, possibility in every obstacle that we've ever had, we're going to be guided, we're going to be blessed, we're going to be promoted. We can't sit and think negatively. And I love what you said, is to learn from other people's journeys and not compare to other people's journeys. For example, in my life, I had so much energy when I was younger, and that's when I could work 18 hours a day, 5 days a week. And on the weekends, sometimes if he would go, Steve Harvey would go do tours, I would be able to do that as well. I can't do that now that I'm 40. I just don't have that type of energy. I don't have that type of patience. I don't have that thing that I had when I was younger. Now, somebody else's story perhaps may be different, where they didn't hustle as much when they were younger, and now when they're 40 they feel all this energy to go out and work these hours and to make these connections. It just switches, and God puts us exactly where we're supposed to be at the right time. So we just have to learn to trust divine order, trust God, and also trust ourselves.
You are right where you're supposed to be in this moment. So I just want to encourage you, enjoy this moment. Take advantage of this opportunity that God has put before you to live out your best life right now. And Elvira, that's what you're doing. And so you've taken us through the journey. Tell us where you are now. Well, of course, right where you're supposed to be, but tell us where you are and what's next for you.
Definitely. Well, a piece of the journey that I haven't shared yet is that I actually got a phone call from Steve Harvey when I was 25 years old, asking me to please relocate to Atlanta because he needed my help once again to be his right-hand person. And I remember telling him absolutely not, and saying, I have a very thriving company. There's no way that I can do that anymore. And I negotiated. And so I ended up negotiating. I told him if I get a big corner office where I can have at least one assistant with me to help me with all of the work, I would do it. And of course, if I got a certain number of salary, that I would do it. And sure enough, I negotiated myself a great deal. I relocated to Atlanta. I lived there for about 2 to 3 years. I helped him write the book, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. I was able to contact my friends at Oprah Winfrey and got him on the show a record 4 times in 1 month. We sold over $100 million worth of books. It was about 4 million books. And from that, I felt the courage to then now release my books. And so I decided to write my first book that I released on my own when I was just about 29 years old, called Your Blueprint. And since then, I decided to transition to doing motivational speaking, to creating events in juvenile halls, to mentoring students at USC, UCLA, because I know what it's like to go to school and pretend like everything's great, but then still have to go visit your parents that are incarcerated, or still have to deal with different obstacles in life, and still having to be brave and push through it. And so from all of my life's obstacles that I've had, I feel like they're nuggets of gold that I have within me that I want to give to others so that they can also be successful. And fast forward to now, which is 10, 11 years later, I'm still doing the same thing in terms of my philanthropy work, but I have decided to only focus on my publicity and my husband's publicity.
Elvira, what would you consider your biggest achievement thus far?
My philanthropy work, 100%. There is no check, no award that I've received that is greater than having a young girl tell me that I changed her life, and that she no longer is walking the streets, or that she's no longer doing things that are beneath her. So for me, all of the testimonies that people have written to me or called me and told me or messaged me on my social media accounts, that is my biggest achievement, is what I've done for others.
And that is what purpose is all about, what we do for others. We want to say thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us. and reminding us that we don't, especially as women, we don't have to live where we're dying, and we don't have to die where we're living. So, as we wrap up, what words of encouragement would you like to leave with our listeners?
I would say the most important, especially for women, is to believe in yourself. Believe in yourself more than anyone else can believe in you, and to trust God. A lot of people say that they believe in God, but I would like to encourage them to trust God, because when you believe in God, it's somewhere out there. When you trust God, you know that whatever you put out, you're going to get back. You know that whatever you dream up, you're going to achieve. Why? Because God is our parent. And just imagine how much your own parents have loved you. Now multiply that by 1,000, and that's how much God loves us. And I just want to remind them that whatever it is that they want, talk to God about it. Pray to God every single day, not just on Sunday, every single day. But then also meditation is incredibly important, because that's when God speaks to us. And to listen to that small voice inside that is directing you, not the negative voice, but the small voice inside that's telling you, call this person, do this thing, this is what I have for you in the future. And to not negate it, and to believe that it will happen, and trust God that it's going to happen.
Elvira, how can people connect with you?
Absolutely. The best way is Instagram. Send me a message and I will make sure to respond to you.
You can connect with Elvira on Instagram at I am Elvira Guzman. That's Instagram at I am Elvira Guzman. Elvira, it's certainly been a pleasure to hear your story today and be encouraged by your awesomeness. Thank you so much for being our special guest.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a true joy.
Well, we promised you we would not disappoint. And I'm sure you agree, we kept our word. That's just how we do it here in the locker room of life on Time to Win podcast. Thank you, my friend, for being our guest today, for listening in. And it's always a pleasure to encourage your heart and inspire you to prosper every step of the way. Until next week, my friend, we'll see you soon. Thank you for listening to Time to Win. I recognize that you appreciate the value provided in today's episode, and for your gratitude, I'm giving you a Time to Win VIP listener badge. So head on over to timetowinpodcast.com. That's timetowinpodcast.com and claim your badge and gain immediate VIP access to more of our next level resources and opportunities, including details on the huddle, a table for 10, the Cure Circle, and the Cure Retreat. Because you've enjoyed today's session, you can also express your gratitude by rating, reviewing, and returning next week with a friend. Oh, by the way, be sure to screenshot today's episode and share it in your Instagram and Facebook story or on your favorite social media platform. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week in the locker room of life here on Time to Win. And remember, the best time to win is now.